Welcome to today's episode of the Good Grief Believer podcast. I am a co-host today, Julie Craig, and I'm co-hosting with my associate, Chris Frazier.
Hi.
And today we are interviewing author Kate J. Meyer.
Hello.
Thank you, Kate. She has written really beautiful books for navigating grief. One book in particular, Faith Doesn't Erase Grief, is wonderful, Embracing the Experience and Finding Hope. That is the precursor to her newest book, Navigating the Waves of Grief, Healing Prompts and Reflections to Move You Forward. And I had a chance to read a fair bit of the book. What's wonderful is the way it is set up has really, really wonderful exercises in it. And so I was able to look through those and just really get excited about what I was reading. The reason that Chris and I are co-hosting is because one of Chris's focuses, foci, however you plural a focus, has been this idea of grief waves. And so then we come across Kate's book, Navigating the Waves of Grief. Obviously, you two have, your minds are telepathically connecting about this imagery of a wave. And so I thought it would be fun for us to have a discussion together because it's been such a focal point for Chris in her grief journey of recognizing waves and articulating them, and then having you, Kate, who you have so much knowledge and background to help, because you are a licensed professional counselor and an ordained minister. Mm-hmm. So really, you are so uniquely qualified to help people in the spiritual aspects of grief and in the emotional and physical and psychological aspects of grief.
Yeah.
So I love that combination. I love that we get to have some time with you and learn from you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited. It's a blending I did not see coming, but that's usually how God works, right?
It is. And speaking of that, would you just give us a little a life sketch?
Yeah.
Tell us about you and who you are and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So I grew up, raised in Wisconsin, will always be home. Wisconsin will always be home. Raised going to church every Sunday in the Reformed Church in America, which is the denomination where I'm ordained. And I didn't know what I was going to do in life. I knew that I would apply to one college, and thankfully I got in because it truly was the only college I applied to. So that worked out well, but I didn't know what I was going there for. I had been thinking youth ministry at that point. And I think it was around junior year that I was like, well, this is fun, but I don't want to do this forever. This is not my forever thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know what is, though. And then this idea of seminary kept coming, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to. So I went kicking and screaming, like, this is the last thing I want to do, but okay, I will go. I don't know why I'm going, because I knew I didn't want to pastor a church. That's what I knew.
Okay. But you could feel God calling for you, and
absolutely. Yeah. I knew I had to go. I just didn't know why. What was the point? Mm-hmm. So I went through seminary, still not really knowing why, but discovered chaplaincy through that process and really loved that aspect of ministry, the one-on-one nature, walking with people through painful diagnoses or discoveries, or even just kind of these painful valleys.
Right.
So that kind of carried me through, and through a very unique conversation with a radiologist uh, who brought up a topic that seminary just does not prepare you for. I decided to go get my counseling degree because he asked a question that I wanted to help him process. And I did not feel responsible with my seminary training to do so.
Wow.
And eventually, fast forward, right, I discover hospice chaplaincy, fell in love with hospice, and then had the opportunity to try bereavement counseling. And it was, I think, my first client. I went to my boss after and said, that is what I am supposed to be doing. That right
Oh.
there is the blending of everything that I've learned to this point. All of the schooling, all of the things just kind of merged together in this beautiful, I call it my soul spot, right? Because
Oh.
there's just something really beautiful about walking with someone from, the very beginning to the point where they are ready to not have to be in that consistent counseling anymore, right? Not to the
Wow.
end, because that's not a thing. It's not a thing with grief, but to the point where they're able to be on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for telling us about
Mhm.
all of that. I love that you call it your soul spot.
Yeah.
And it's funny how we can come to a place. This is the case. I don't want to speak for Chris. Maybe Chris, you can speak to your experience, but my it's an interesting skill to be able to speak about death and grieving and loss and hard things so comfortably that it's like you're talking about a grocery list,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes you can forget that it's a very uncomfortable topic for some people that are experiencing it brand new, when
Yes.
when you've become really comfortable with it. And for me, it really started when I met my late husband. He was widowed pretty young. He was 33.
Mm.
He had just finished his dermatology residency, and a month later, his wife, who was 31, passed away,
Wow.
with leaving two kids. I happened to be just a, air quotes, old maid that didn't have children. I'd never been married, but I was just in that sweet age spot where I wanted to be a mother, and I was really enthusiastic about coming into his life and being a part of this team of raising these two children that had lost their mom. And he was wonderful and amazing. And then we had two more children.
Mm.
So I tell people that death was a guest at our wedding,
Mm.
because from the very first day we were having these conversations, and had them for 25 years until he passed away. And so now I'm in the unique situation of being someone who is widowed and was also married to someone who was widowed. So I didn't start my life thinking someday I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about grief.
Yeah.
But my training, so to speak, well, and I did a master's degree in theology and leadership at Gonzaga University, and that's a stepping stone for many people to become chaplains. Many of
Mm-hmm.
my classmates became chaplains, but my path seemed to be this: helping people come together to find these resources to to learn how to grieve well, to
Yeah.
know that you can go through the hardest things ever, but you can be whole. You'll never be complete, like, it's not whole without those broken pieces of the ones that you love that you miss, but you can actually go forward and have a life that is meaningful and purposeful and not painful constantly.
Right.
And 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 that's my passion, is for that message to get out, that people can know that they won't always have to feel so terrible, and that there's hope. And I feel like the resources that you have provided are a wonderful, wonderful option for someone searching for this kind of real hands-on practical help. And then, Chris, can I just punt that over to you so that you could share your thoughts about that?
Yeah, totally. It's funny when you were talking about kind of forgetting what it's like to feel all the feels of grief, and so you're just talking about it like a grocery list. I find myself in that position all the time because I've done a lot of I have talked about it openly from day one. We were super open once we got the diagnosis that our daughter had trisomy 18. We told everybody because I was continuing with this pregnancy and I didn't know how I was going to fake it, and pretend like nothing was wrong. And so we told everyone. And so I've had a lot of practice talking about it since then. My friend and I actually became birth and bereavement doulas after that. I volunteer with a local nonprofit that helps grieving children. So, I've talked about it a ton. And like Julie said, sometimes it's hard to remember that for people who are just barely going through this, it's way more painful, and I get so used to it. I forget that element. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I think this is definitely important work that we're doing and trying to help people, like you said, recognize that there is a way through, and that it's not going to always feel so debilitating every day of forever,
Yeah. Kate, can I just read from the introduction of your book, Navigating the Waves of Grief? Just you're an engaging writer, and if you don't mind, because I'm reading in your voice, your experience, so it'll be through my interpretation. But sure. I loved how you started. You said, as I went through my new computer, freshly loaded with transferred content, I stumbled upon an audio file long forgotten. Knowing that my extended family would also enjoy hearing Grandpa's voice again, I decided to listen to it before emailing it out in case anything needed further explanation. So far, this sounds lovely, right? Just doing a little family togetherness work, right? And then I go on. I settled in, heart prepared to hear Grandpa read a story, and pressed play. I had closed my eyes to take in the experience, but seconds after I pressed play, my eyes flew open. My heart rate skyrocketed as Grandma's voice filled the room. Here was a wave of emotion that I didn't see coming. I had completely forgotten her introduction of the story and was not prepared to hear her voice at all. The tears poured out before I could process what was happening. I paused the file to ground myself before restarting it and receiving the love of Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah. Oh, what's so amazing to me is just like as soon as you started reading it, I went, oh boy, okay. I know. Did you have a wave? What this is. I did. I'm like, I know what this is. I know what's coming. It's okay. Because it was such a powerful moment for me. I mean, I genuinely, I knew by the file name, like, this is Grandpa reading this story. Yay, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to be so excited to have this. And then there she was doing this lovely introduction. But it knocked me so fast. And that, to me, is such a great example of what a wave is, right? Because you think you're prepared for one aspect of grief. Because I was braced. Grandpa Barry had a very distinct voice, and his reading voice was something powerful. So I was prepared. I braced myself for that. I knew it would be a little, I'd get a little verklempt, and that would be okay. But so I think grief does that. You can be prepared for what you know is coming, but there are also the things that we don't know are coming, or we don't know are going to hit us, right? That the clients who come and say, I had no idea the 4th of July meant so much to me and my family. But now that that person is not here, it was so different and I hated it.
Right.
So processing that with them of it, it wasn't even that big of a thing, but that tradition, we weren't doing it anymore. And I didn't like it.
Right.
Yeah. Those unexpected things that don't seem like a big deal until the first time you don't do them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I call those sneaker waves.
Sneaker waves. I like that.
Like, you're at the beach and you go
Yes.
out to a certain level and you're like, okay, I'm going to just go wet up to my knees, right? And so you're at that level and you're watching the waves and you're like, okay, this is where it's going to be. It's going to get my knees. It's going to get my knees. And then all of a sudden the wave is way bigger and you're wet up to your shoulders, Like, you can brace for it. You think it's coming, but guess what? It's a lot bigger when it actually gets there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. But the point is, they're going to come, right?
Yeah.
There's no way, no one can ever anticipate or plan well enough to have a life without these moments.
Not at all. Can't get away from them. And that I think is the first step, right? To get to a point where we can say, I know and I accept that I'm going to be dealing with grief just forever. It's just going to happen forever, right? Because the person that died was supposed to be here for, and then for years, you can name all of the things, right? Chris, for you had, from the moment you found out you were pregnant, you future casted all kinds of things for your daughter and your whole family, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a main piece that non-grievers, people who try to be helpers, don't understand, is that no matter how long it's been, how many years it's been, the big days, and big being a relative term, big to the griever, are going to be impactful forever because the person was supposed to be there for all of them. So, and then those are days where we expect the waves, but then there are going to be others where you're just minding your own business, getting groceries, and somebody walks by with the right perfume or cologne, or the song comes on and you're like, what? Why is this song on right now? And it just gets you.
Yes. That is so true. Is it possible? So this is interesting. At first, I was thinking about how I can still remember standing in front of cucumbers in the grocery store, my first grocery visit after my husband passed away. And I remember thinking how strange it was that everybody around me seemed to be just having a normal day in the grocery store. And I was looking at cucumbers and just feeling nothing but grief, sorrow, sadness, just felt so icky. And it felt so disturbing to me that it was just a normal day. It was just Wednesday for everyone else.
Yeah.
For me, it was a symbolic beginning of the rest of my life of never going to the grocery store with my husband again, or for him, you know?
Yep.
He's not going to be here to help me eat these cucumbers.
Exactly.
I don't have to buy as many of them now because,
Right. Yeah. Or do I even like cucumbers? He liked cucumbers.
Yes. That's a big one. That is a big one.
Yeah.
That people, that's part of that identity piece that, especially in whether it's whatever, some kind of partnered relationship, whatever that means for you. When the person dies, inevitably in that type of relationship, you have merged a lot of things. There's been give and take. And we do merge eating styles. We just do because it's just easier sometimes. Right. And so you start eating things that you just eat because the other person really likes them. You don't care really. So there's, in the beginning, it's like out of habit, you just start to make that meal. And then you have this moment of like, oh, I don't have to eat this anymore. I can stop eating this. Can I?
Right.
Is that okay? And it leads to
Right.
this whole, but what I love about that is that is usually the door that opens that allows me to say, and that is when you talk to your person and you say, I love you and I miss you and I'm not going to eat this anymore. And I know that you are maybe a little bit sad that I'm not eating it anymore, but I only ate it for you and I don't have to.
Right.
And they chuckle a little bit but that it also then gives them that permission to say, when you talk to your person, it doesn't have to be this formal, heavy, perfect thing, right? Still, like, you can get snarky with them, you can get silly with them, if you start to say, I just wish I could tell them,
Right.
whatever was going to come after that, just tell them.
I
Because it
love
needs,
that
you
idea.
need to get it out, right?
Let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about how the book is structured. You structured
Mhm.
it around 4 themes: emotions, connection, identity, and through. Can you unpack each of those briefly and tell us why those themes?
Yeah. Emotions, because adults are not very good at them. and because you can't do grief without them. So, grief is a time in life where emotions are all over the place. We have multiple emotions happening at one time. And if we can learn how to identify them, we can learn how to express them. And when we can express them, we can release them and have at least a moment of reprieve from them.
Yes.
Um, you know, we when kids are, I don't know, like 3, right? We start to really discourage the temper tantrums because
Mm.
they get risky, really. Quite, if we're being honest, they get to the point where they might hurt themselves when they're throwing their fists and such, or somebody else. Um, but in the moment, because we as the adults are usually pretty flustered in that moment, we tend to not say, now, what you're feeling is okay, right? Like, we don't pause and say, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. That's just not a good way to let it out. So we just tend to internalize, and then we thus begins our journey of stuffing emotions, and we don't learn how to deal with them, identify them, express them, release them. So that's why emotions. Um, Connections is about connecting with self, connecting with God or the divine, whatever that means for you, and connecting with others, because grief is a time where we are very isolated and disconnected, um, even from self, right? It's like you just feel very kind of like you're floating a little bit. And you lose sense of who you are. And so it's learning how primarily to reconnect to yourself and then reconnect to these other, to God and to other people in your world, which, sometimes that feels important. And sometimes that feels like the last thing we want to do. And that's
Right.
okay. That's okay. Um, Identity is there because grief inevitably changes us. We become very different people, right? Physiologically, chemically, we become different people.
Right.
And so it's, going back just to earlier in our conversation, you can't be who you were before. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not about getting back to who you were. It's about who am I now? Now that I've been changed, now that my world has shifted, now that this part of my worldview maybe has changed, who am I? What's important to me? Has my purpose changed? Has my meaning changed? Mm-hmm. Maybe it hasn't, but we have to take the time to figure that out. So who am I now? And how do I relate to the people in my world? Mm-hmm. When it's a parent death or a sibling death, inevitably the family system gets reshuffled and everybody's roles change. So that's all part of identity. And then through, can I tell the story of through, where this came from?
Yes.
So I was listening to, I'm a big audiobook person, and I was listening to a book. I honestly couldn't even tell you what it was. It was some fiction book, but they were reading Psalm 23 for some reason, and the actor, the way they emphasized the word through in Psalm 23, it was like I was hearing that word in that psalm for the first time. So even though I walk through the darkest valley, my chosen translation uses those words. And it was this moment of, okay, so the darkest valleys are going to happen.
Yes.
We will be in them. Yeah. We will not be alone in them. And there is another side. We will get out of them with no guarantee that we'll never go in another one. But we will have reprieve. We will come out on the other side of it. But in order to do that, we have to make our way through the valley. We cannot pick ourselves up and just skip it as much as we want to, right? As much as we would love to just say, I'm not doing this. And I think that's our impulse, because we are taught, again, from a very young age, run away from pain, right? If it's going to hurt you, don't do it.
It's a physiological response, right? It's automatic.
Yes, safety, right? Stove, hot, don't touch. Okay. Grief is a very painful, intense time. And so our safety inclination, our fight is saying, no, I don't want to do this. And we have to approach it and say, this is not going to be enjoyable. Parts of this are going to be really painful. And I will see glimmers of hope. I will see pinpricks of light to guide me. I will have reassurances that I'm going somewhere, that somehow I'm going to make it through, and the darkness will continue to lift. So I'm not, as you've said from the very beginning of our talk today, I'm not always going to be where I am right now. Because through also says movement, right? Through also says I can't just stay here. And I think the temptation can be, especially in child loss, it can be really tempting to stay because of the connection to the child. So we have to learn and then trust our own self. This is where self-connection comes in. We have to learn and trust that you moving forward does not mean that you lose them, that they don't come with you in some way, right? And that takes baby steps, and it takes practice, and it takes repetition. But movement. It takes movement.
Yeah. I love that. I 100% can identify with what you just said. Like it is super hard. In fact, going back to the unexpected grief waves, as Julie was telling her story, I was thinking about my first time where I experienced kind of a sneaker wave, or at least one that really stuck with me. It was New Year's. So our daughter died in 2019. And when it was 2019, getting ready to turn over to 2021 or 2020, and we're approaching New Year's. As soon as the clock struck midnight, I just had this crash of grief, which I was totally not expecting, but it was because I was leaving the year where my daughter existed, right? Like she lived for 2 months. And so, this is the time when she was alive. And so leaving behind 2019 felt like I was leaving her behind too. Time was moving on, but she was still stuck there, and so that was a huge unexpected wave of grief that just came out of nowhere, and I had to just sit with it. We were at a friend's house, and luckily, like I said, we had been really open about it, and so the friend was like, "Hey, you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, this happened," and we kind of talked through it a little bit, and it was fine, but it was super hard, and I was totally not expecting it. So I'm curious, what inspired you to write this Waves of Grief book? Like, was there a particular client story that happened or something where you were like, I have to write this? Like, what was that moment for you?
Yeah. So Faith Doesn't Erase Grief, I now look at as the passive book, the book that people can use just to kind of ease in, right? Mm-hmm. And Navigating the Waves of Grief is the active book. It's the book for the client who I talk in there about positive avoidance, how we can fill the shelves with all the books, which I don't dissuade people from buying the books at all. And we can read and we can listen to podcasts and we can watch movies and have conversations. But if we're not doing our work, if we're not actually facing and allowing ourselves to experience it, we're never going to move. Right? We're doing the opposite. So that's what it came from. It came from it felt like Faith Doesn't Erase Grief was this kind of start. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like it needed the next level, because in both cases I had clients asking, "What can I do? You keep telling me I have to do things.
Right.
So tell me some things I can do." And I wanted things that I could trust to point them to. And it's hard, I think, because in the Christian market, sometimes there's not really a lot of psychology involved. Mm-hmm. And in the grief psychology market, there's not often a lot of spirituality,
right,
in general, let alone Christian-based,
right,
worldview systems.
Right.
So that's really the foundation of both of these books, is to merge those two things and give people a place to, grief is a whole being experience. And so we have to approach it in that way.
I love that. You've mentioned grief changes you, and that's really true. And I think for people of faith, it's a surprise. It can come as a surprise that these terrible losses actually change us. Mm-hmm. And so, the Faith Doesn't Erase Grief. I see what you're saying about. It's almost like this is the theory. This introducing people to the idea that even a person of faith will grieve, and that having faith, being a person of faith, doesn't exclude you from the dark valleys. Mm-hmm. This is just part of our experience, and I love that you pointed out that we are not alone in those valleys. We truly are not alone. Yeah. But it can be so dark, and we can be so inwardly focused on our pain that we can't always see the points of light that are around us. Sometimes it takes, getting through them and looking back to see God's hand in really beautiful ways, whether it comes as the people that come into your life that just come right at the right time, or, you come across things. But I love this message that you can have faith and also grieve at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think your counseling and your faith, your spiritual training, when combined, really helps treat the person as a whole being,
Yeah. I think probably the part of Faith Doesn't Erase Grief that got the most pushback, maybe, from certain, I call them branches of Christianity, is this idea that doubt is an essential part of faith. And that being angry at God, questioning God, is perfectly acceptable. And that walking away from God and saying, I cannot even engage you right now. Like I did everything that you told me to do. I prayed, I trusted, I hoped, and here we are. So I'm out for a little bit. Maybe I'll come back, maybe I won't. I honestly don't know right now. And that, to me, that is the most beautiful image of grace that I can imagine, right? To know that that God's grace and love is vast enough to say, yeah, I get it. I know that is gonna have to happen because I didn't want this to happen, right? And then we devolve into all of those questions that just are like mind-boggling that we can't answer. But so a message in both of the books that I hope comes across is we can't hide from grief by claiming heaven. We can't hide from grief by prayer. And we can't hide from all of the emotions that we might have towards God. Now, I'm not saying every griever who is also a believer gets angry with God, right? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if that is you, that is okay. And there are scripture examples in both books of that, because I think people need that. I think we are so trained to hear certain scriptures over and over and over again that we forget the breadth of things that are available. And if you start to read scripture from the lens of a griever, you hear it differently, you feel it differently, and it speaks to us differently. It hits differently. Even to say, I'm going to step away for a little bit.
Everything that you just said really, really resonates with me, because I always said, I called it faith-splaining, right? When people tried to use faith to explain away my grief, and so even just when I first heard the title of your first book, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this book. This is exactly what I've been saying, because I just felt so much like that I wasn't allowed to be a person of faith and also experience grief. And if I was feeling the full brunt of grief, then maybe I just didn't have enough faith, or I wasn't being faithful enough, or I wasn't relying on God enough, or right.
Yeah.
And I had to get to this point where I was like, you know what? Grief is a human experience. And I am here on this earth for a human experience. And even Christ, who healed Lazarus, like brought him back from the dead, he knew that he was about to do that. And yet he cried. Yeah. He grieved. So gosh dang it, I can too, but yeah, like absolutely what you just said just really, really resonates, because I think a lot of people have that, if they're a person of faith and also experiencing grief, there's this kind of chasm that you have to bridge to figure out how I can be in both of these places. I can still have faith and also feel grief. And the presence of one doesn't negate the other.
Right.
And I hope that by hearing this conversation and considering these ideas, that someone who is angry at God doesn't think their only option is to walk away. To know it's okay to feel that. And Kate, I love what you have brought to the surface here. Because it was literally in a counseling session that my therapist said to me, "It's okay that you feel this way. God is big enough for that."
Yeah.
And that was an expansive thought for me. Like, yeah, he really is. I can feel these things, and it doesn't push away.
Right.
The God who I know loves me.
Right. And that's where reading it from the grief lens really makes a difference, because, when you go to the Psalms, when you're in the depths of an emotion like anger, all of a sudden you see these people who, oh, wow, okay, there's some angry people here too, right?
Right.
What is Jonah doing at the end of the book if not throwing a temper tantrum?
Right.
And Hannah, hers is one of my favorite stories, because she's when I'm invited to preach at churches before teaching a Sunday school or something about one of these books, this is what I preach on, because I love to ask congregations to think about, what do you think Hannah must have been doing to be accused of being drunk? Like, how must she have been praying?
Right.
Silently, by the way, to be accused of that, right? So get that image in your head. How was she moving her body? What did her face look like? I just imagine her face was contorted and reddened and, tear streaked, and her body was moving and silently screaming. I don't know, just working through a whole variety of emotions that, if you know her story very well, included anger. And I would imagine, I don't know, if you kind of fill in some backstory, probably some grief too. So it's there.
Right.
I think we're just taught to read scripture from a different angle. And so we have to remember that it's there for us as a way to get to know not only God, but ourselves and the ways that we interact with each other. And if, Chris, you said a little bit ago, I was created with these emotions. And yes, exactly. Emotions are natural parts of who we are. So if we were given them, right, these are, I've heard somebody say, but they're a part of the fall. No. These are just natural things that we have.
Yep.
So we're meant to experience them.
Yes.
Whatever that looks like, right?
Yes.
There are unhealthy ways to express emotions, of course. But you don't have to prevent yourself from feeling them.
Well, and as Chris pointed out, Christ felt and demonstrated emotion.
Yeah.
He wasn't just on a perpetual feel-good ride.
Clearly. Right.
Right.
Not a fan of the money tables in the temple, right?
Exactly. There was anger, frustration, fatigue, sorrow, grief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even with all the power of the universe. So that is a beautiful thought. I love that. This has been such a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I wonder, for those who are supporting someone in grief, what are some things that you hope they do differently? And a lot of these things are in your book, but what would you suggest for someone who is trying to support someone else who is grieving?
Be the one that says the person's name, because everybody stopped saying their name. Be the one who says, is today a day that we talk about them or a day that we don't? Is today a day that we need to give your grief space or that you need a grief break? Be the one that allows the full gamut of emotions. And don't let the elephant in the room be the elephant in the room. Just name it. Just call it out. But I think really the biggest one is just say their name. Say their name. And if you have a story, if something comes to mind that you want to share it. Because first of all, I think grievers are very good about saying, I can't hear that right now, right? I can't. Today's not a day. Can you tell me later? Can you email it to me, text it to me, whatever? But also, you very well might be giving the griever a part of their person they've never had. You might be giving them a story they never knew. And that is something as grievers, I think we fear we're never going to have, right? We'll never have a new something again. And also be the one who asks, where have you seen them or felt them? Where has there, have you dreamt about them? Have you, right? Let's just normalize that, because sometimes there's dreams, there's pressure on the shoulder, there's things. Yeah.
I really love that, especially as, someone who lost an infant. Like, it's not like people have memories or stories or, shared experiences with this person, right? Like, she was only here for 2 months and only a handful of people got to meet her and hold her and spend time with her, and so I really like what you said about allowing people to just talk about them, because especially now, like, I don't get to talk about Emily very often. I don't even get to say her name all that often. Like, you think about how many times in a given day or course of conversation you talk about your living children, right? Someone might ask, like, oh, how's so-and-so doing? Oh, they're getting so big, or what are they up to these days, or whatever, like, that's just normal. But for a grieving parent who has lost a young child, like, you don't get to talk about that person very much. And when you do, it's a very specific scenario, right? Like with certain people, because nobody wants to talk about somebody's dead baby. That's uncomfortable, right? Like, that's not a conversation you're going to lead with. And so I really like what you said about just be that person that's willing to go there with them and ask how they're doing. And if it's a day that they're ready to talk about it, give them permission to bring up that person. Because I think especially a lot of times people think, oh, if I say this person's name, I'm going to make them sad, or I'm going to, like, trigger a memory or whatever. But guess what? They're already on their mind anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You saying Emily's name is not going to make me any more sad than I already was that she's not here. You didn't remind me suddenly that she's gone. I'm very aware of that fact, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you remembered is actually way more impactful, because then I know that you're thinking of me and of her, and you're now a safe person that I can talk about, however I'm feeling, whether it's, oh, today's a rough day, I had this happen, or I remembered this or that, or, oh, I'm feeling pretty okay today, whatever. It gives me permission to be able to go there with you.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're absolutely right. Like, just be that person.
Yeah. And I think too, just that, like, we have to get to a point where we can change the narrative that tears aren't bad. Tears aren't weakness. tears are nothing more than an expression of, at minimum, one kind of emotion. But for a lot of people, it's like, it could be a multitude of emotions, right? I like to talk about tears as something that they wash out the yuck to make room for the spirit to do what the spirit does, right?
I love that.
That's all that's happening. It's just getting it out. Just get it out, wash it out, clean it out. So they're not weakness.
Yeah, and we shouldn't apologize for the tears.
No.
Don't apologize for your own tears, and and learn to be comfortable with someone else's tears.
Yeah.
I love that.
So where can listeners find your book and connect with your work, follow what you're doing? Like, you've told us about these super awesome things. How can people find them and use them?
hjmeyer.com has all of it. The two grief books, I have two novels as well, and they're all discussed there. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. If you look Kate J. Meyer author, you'll tend to find me. Those links are also on that website. So I usually just send people there. That has my email, which I would just say here, but it's kind of it's a ridiculously complicated email. So
that's funny.
It's going to look weird, but just trust it. Trust the process. And in both books, I invite readers to email me at certain points, and I really do. Like that is a genuine invitation. I want to hear how it's going and how the experience is. So yeah.
I feel like that. I feel like you're very genuine in that. Just having this conversation, you've been so easy to talk to and just a genuinely nice, inviting, engaging person. So I hope that people do. I hope that they will look at your website and check out your books. These are really nice kinds of books. If you felt like you needed to give somebody a book who was grieving, this is nice because it's written from a faith perspective, but it doesn't make you erase your grief in order to have faith.
Yeah.
And though there's a time for a message of great faith and hope in the resurrection, in God's goodness and grace, but right when somebody is grieving at their deepest, darkest time is usually, surprisingly for others, not the time that they want to hear the message of hope. They really want to hear something more raw and real, and feel like faith can be a companion through that rather than a catapult to another sphere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bottom line, right? Easter gets really complicated, right? For grievers in the first few years, especially, it's real complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start asking some pretty big questions. If this, why not this? Right.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. We can't just throw that at a griever and expect them to feel hope from it, because they might not.
Right. So,
yeah.
And I would hope, I'm such a huge advocate of finding a faith community. I really do think wherever a person is in their grief journey, it can be very helpful to surround yourself with others who are not grieving, that who can just help you stay connected to something bigger, great. I know Chris was an amazing example of this when she and her husband found out that their baby daughter was going to go through this very tenuous journey of life. Bringing us into their pain it created an opportunity for so much sincere intimacy, spiritual, emotional intimacy, in a way that for me, made me feel closer to her, and I hope made her feel closer to those that she let in. And it can be a great experience to walk side by side with someone who is grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not have survived the loss of my husband without the community of friends, faith community, and my family. It just made all the difference.
Same. I mean, that's how we survived, was sharing it. Had we just kept it close to the vest and not told anybody about the diagnosis and just moved forward, had her, and then whatever happened, like just didn't tell people the details, I would have imploded. There is no way in heck I could have survived that time period without having all of those people.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, again, thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been such a joy. I've really enjoyed this dialogue. And before we end, would you please answer our question that we ask everyone? What do you think it means to grieve well?
I think to grieve well is to face it and engage it. I really think it's that simple and that complicated to allow yourself to grieve. I think that's what it is. To allow yourself to do the work.
Thank you. And you've provided a great resource for those who are willing to engage in that work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bo.